48-hour art check, round 108.
I
I
pieces of
I think this might be the punch drunk tired episode, right?
yeah. I think for those of you who haven't taken on like the 100 days challenge, or like maybe for those of you who haven't started a 48-hour art check, um, you like this kind of day is exactly the reason why the art check's so important, because this is one of those days where like I'm burning the candle on both ends,
Yeah.
and and just plates are going to drop. So we'll get into that when we get into the topic and stuff. But yeah, this is a rough one.
Yeah. All right. So let's
So what I'm hoping, like before we even get into anything, I'm hoping this starts out negative and gives us the juice and positivity we need to kind of go forth, rock our projects, do really awesome at our jobs, and be good family members and stuff like that.
yeah, and
Um,
and I'd be curious because I have felt before where I'm just like totally beat, and then by the end of the art check I'm like all energetic and it's giving me my second wind for the day. I
all
think there's
right.
I think there's something about doing this and talking about it and stuff that really helps. So if you want to, if you're watching this later and you want to jump in and let me finish this sentence and then jump to the end and see if I sound more excited, then that's an interesting little experiment. I don't know. Of course,
I think so.
I just
I
feigned
think
excitement, so I don't know if that counts.
just compare our moods now to our moods after, and
Yeah,
understand that a lot of this might come across as negative, and that's just us being transparent about the process of creating stuff, which has its ups and it has some pretty big lows. So, all
yeah.
right, let's get into it. You
Okay,
want to start? You want me to
sure.
start?
I'll start.
Okay, what'd you
Um,
get done?
so my progress is very little. I went back to that page that I already finished. And this just took me way too long. Just way too long. I got one of the cameos inked and then a bunch of the ribbon. That's it. And that took me like twice as long as it should have. And I don't know. I was just kind of in one of those really distracted moods. I did it. And then today I haven't. This is the first. It's like almost 10:30. This is the first time I've gotten down to my studio. So
Yep.
just one of those. So it's one of those days where I can report that something was done. That's as best I can get.
I would publicly shame you. However, when I get to mine, you'll see why I won't.
Okay, let's let's get there.
Okay. So that's it. That's all I got done in 48 hours. So that puts me about two panels behind where I'd like to be. I was expecting that wide panel would probably take 2 days. So I think that fit the projection.
Yeah,
But it bugs me to no avail that I am now needing two, like, I need to catch up in my head. I'd have to do two uh, pencils for the Dragon comic for the 100 Days anthology, and same reasons. Like it literally has just been hectic, a lot of overtime at my job, and then just burning myself out, like just trying to kind of like continue doing all the extra projects. Like I recorded 2 songs yesterday with my band, and it's just, well, we'll get into this struggles.
yeah. So let's
so
let's let's
so
jump
what you
into
what you what caused such the delay and all that business?
what didn't. Nothing huge. I mean, last night got started super late, and then when I finally got into a groove and I got into this audiobook, I stayed up way too late, and then I got up way too early, and then I was going all day long because like it's like one of those big projects for the students, and so I'm like normally you're supposed to do like they recommend that you do like about 5 office hours a week, and
Yeah.
um, I usually do like 12 to 15 on projects like this, and so like I met with students today for I don't know, like 4.5 hours outside of class,
Wow.
and that's a lot on top of like grading and teaching and stuff. And like I like it because I like meeting with the students, but at the same time, like just being on and being in like problem solving mode for other people's
Yes.
problems where I don't know why their file isn't working because I haven't been there the whole time, and they've been like working on this Illustrator file for like 25 hours, and they don't know what they're doing. And so some of it is like really dumb stuff that you never think of. You're like, well, why would you even do that? And then,
Yeah.
so it's just like mentally tiring. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then
No.
I didn't get to eat today until like 2 because I had to skip breakfast because I was in a hurry. And so then
Yep.
low blood sugar. And then all I had in the office was like mixed nuts. So I basically ate like mixed nuts until like 7 o'clock tonight and water. So yeah.
Oh, by the way, so we got a full chat.
Oh, good.
And if you guys are just joining us, if you're feeling low energy, we're like, there's frequently a topic of spinning plates, and we're going to be talking about dropping plates this time because Cory and I, it's funny because I was feeling all guilty, like, oh man, like I'm not going to match what Cory got done. And it turns out we're like both in this remarkably mirror-like situation. Our man month is sinking.
Wait, Josh, have our cycles lined up?
I know.
Is that what it is?
Our cycles are synced.
Our creative cycles are synced.
But thank you, Squatchy Inc. Let's see who else we got. We got Toon Blast. I'd rather be drawing Scott, Matthew, and Pepper in the chat. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So my challenges were like remarkably similar. It's just tons of overtime at work. What you were describing about lunch, yeah, I haven't had breakfast in like the whole week actually, because it's just been that crazy. And then just kind of overdoing it with, like I'm a crazy ambitious person, and so I don't want to drop any of my plates, and so I just continue to spin them. And I have to admit, I think I'm potentially like dancing on burnout, and that's not a good place to be. So,
Right.
But it's good. Like, honestly, I'm really glad we have the art check because I'm like, oh, okay, it's not just me. Like, that's part of this whole thing too. So
That's why we include challenges as one of the 3 things, is because I think especially online, there is a potential to kind of only show the good stuff and like only extremes, right? Like,
yeah,
the really horrible things and the hatred and the awfulness, or the really, really good stuff. But like most of what is really hard about life and being creative is kind of in the middle. It's mundane, and it's like a lot of the times, like I can't think of anything to say for challenges. Like there were challenges,
yeah,
but it was kind of like,
yeah.
just life.
Mainly like
Like,
it's the typical challenge, like finding time, or
right.
like balancing being a good dad or something. Like
Yeah.
it's rarely like to the extent that it is right now. And what's funny is I think it's also just because I just got somewhat well from being sick, and then it's like you know but it is funny because I'm also recognizing, and I totally recognize it now, there's negativity, dude. Like I'm feeling my
Yeah.
own self. I'm like, I feel I'm projecting negativity. I'm feeling negativity. And it's very similar to what you were describing. I like love what I do for a living, but I think there is something about spending, an 8-hour day where you're just you're putting out fires and solving other people's issues, and it's engaging and exciting, but you get off and you've been firing on all cylinders. And then first off, like the thing we've discussed before, I'm sorry, this is going a little long, but I've been kind of feeling the same thing that you've described, where it's like, today I got home and I was acting, I think, a little bit too much like a manager. And I'm like, I'm not
Oh,
a manager. I'm not a manager here. Like my
yeah.
wife has the house. Like she's doing great. But it's hard to shut off the like, oh, there's a problem, do this. Like, oh,
Right.
and we got to back plan and do this. And like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to shut off that part of your brain when you're expected to have that on all day. It's just it's a head trip sometimes, especially when, like I said, it's like you're juggling a million things. And I think you and I, like, part of why we even started this is like we have similar personalities of just like we like to get things done
Yeah.
and we like making stuff. And and we're not, like, in a weird way, we're just not really healthy when we're not making stuff. So
Right.
it's like but that in itself brings all kinds of challenges that we'll be addressing in the topic and stuff. So okay, so what's your plan for the next few days?
Excuse me. So my plan is just to finish this page. Let's see. Today is Wednesday, Friday. Okay, I'm not going to finish this page. I am going to get 2 more cameos done, and maybe part of the boat. I think that's where I'm going to get, because I'm also going to start the sticker stint tomorrow. And since that's not like a time limit thing, it's not like spend 30 minutes or spend 2 hours or whatever. It's like start something and finish it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit harder to gauge, and I have, I still have like a quality that I want to meet, and so sometimes those things take 6 hours, and sometimes I can knock them out in like 90 minutes. Um, but it's kind of hard to tell. So yeah, long story short, if I'm being realistic, I will get 2 or 3 of those cameos done, and then I will have 2 or 3 stickers by the next time we meet, because I'll do one. No, I'll have 2 stickers done by the next time we meet, or at least 1.5.
Cool. I think
So
you're gonna have company because Squatchy in the chats says he's ready for sticker stint. So
yeah,
I think
actually, I'm super
on.
excited because there's a ton of people that are jumping in. I think Ox is
Yeah.
jumping in. I've got a Facebook group called Side Hustle, and I've got about 16 people there that are going to do some level of it. About 6 of them have said that they're going to do it. 10 of them are going to said that they're going to do as much as they can, but not do it daily. And then on YouTube, at least half a dozen people have said, "Yeah, I'm in." So I don't know, man. I don't know how many people are going to make it all the way through, but I think at least over 20 are going to start it,
That's
which is
good, man.
rad. So I'm excited about it.
It's a good group, and you guys will keep each other afloat, like we were kind of
Yeah.
saying at the top. Like, part of why it's good to do these things in like groups, it's almost like going hiking with a buddy. It's like, or running, I guess would be a better analogy, where it's like, if you do that with a friend who's like really motivated, then like when each of you is at that point of like, I don't know, like the other can be like, come on. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's a really good place to be.
Well, and sometimes
Um,
just looking at somebody else and going, "Oh, cool, they're still doing this. I can do it."
yeah, they're still hanging in. Yeah.
Like I tell
Yeah.
my students all the time, if someone has done it, that means it's possible, and that means you can do it.
Agreed. Yeah.
So
Um, and then there's, yeah, I mean, to me, like, I think that's why it's really important. You don't want to get too comparative, but it's really important to like have heroes that, don't idolize them. They're human beings,
right.
but it's good to look to people who have really consistent, crazy output when you're doing art, because it's like you can feel like daunted by the level that we're doing, but then like you see these Marvel guys that are pulling like 16, 17-hour days every day and
Yeah, 7 days a
crank out.
week, and they're doing
Yeah,
more
they
than
managed to
22
crank out a
finished
monthly.
pages a
Yeah,
month. Yeah.
so and or Windsor McKay did like one Finding Nemo spread every week, and it's like I could have like probably a whole week, and that seems close to impossible, but it's super inspiring.
Yeah.
So um
Yeah. So
all right,
what are your plans?
so my plans, I don't want to be too ambitious because I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but I also don't want to be too realistic. So I'm gonna say, I know our next art check's probably not going to be on Friday because of Valentine's Day weekend. So we'll probably sneak it in on Saturday or Sunday,
Hmm.
depending on what works with us and our wives.
Yeah.
um, uh, but I think I'm gonna try to do, let's see, 2 panels of the Dragon comic, um, I'm gonna try to get those knocked out tonight to kind of get myself caught up, and then I'm thinking like a third panel of the Dragon comic, and at least one of those wide spreads. So the second really wide panel for quarterly stories. Like that's where I'd like to be, if not further. If I can beat that, that would be great.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Even when you were talking about your progress, you're working on a big splash page, which actually those can take quite a bit of time, and they can feel frustrating because they take a little more time than a single panel.
Right. Because you're not
because like a page like that one you're working on, that's a multi-panel page, but it's got an unusual spread, so it's less methody,
right.
which makes it a little more challenging to execute. So like to me, even those really wide panels take longer than just like a small panel.
And these are not tight pencils. I'm inking on roughs actually. And so like I still don't know what that ship is going to look like. And so I still have to figure that out. I kind of jumped into inking a little early, but you know, like that ship is going to look drastically more detailed.
Yeah, and that the Triton is that a Triton? Is that like what the guy?
The third page, that's Poseidon's wife, Triton's mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one that's inked?
Oh, the one that's inked, that's a Droger. That's the Viking.
Yeah. Okay. That looks great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I really love I really love the texture and the detail on the beard and stuff. It's super cool, and it's really clean, and it reads from a distance. So I think it's kind of like that crazy crowd scene you were working on.
Right.
Just got to take it slow and steady, and the next thing you know, you'll be done and be like, "How did I do this page again?"
Yeah. Well, I was hoping to get my 4 pages done before the sticker stint, and now what I'm realizing is that I am going to have to stick to half an hour a day, and it's just gonna take longer because I'll be doing what you've been doing for the last couple of weeks, which is 2 or 3 things at once rather than one thing.
Yeah.
So I'll be. I mean, I've been doing 2 or 3 things too, but one main thing, and now I've got 2 main things.
Yeah.
So it's just the pace of that inking is just gonna slow down drastically because I'll be spending quite a bit of time doing daily videos for the sticker stint and for the actual creation of it. Because I'm also going to be looking at other people's stuff, and I want to feature everybody that's doing it. And so I'm gonna get in there, and when somebody does a really cool sticker, I'm gonna include it in the video. So there's gonna be like research and gathering stuff,
nice.
And so it'll be tricky.
It's going to be challenging. Toon Blast says he's got 15 stickers line art down with the first sticker ready to post tomorrow.
Rad. That's awesome.
And then I think and then Squatchy Ink said he's got 14 sketch too as well. So they're excited. This is the beauty of those challenges. It brings people together.
Yeah.
So that's cool, man. I don't know how you're going to do it. But then again, like I like juggling too, so
yeah.
All right, so that's going to lead us to our topic. So, do you want to hit it off, or do you want me to?
I'll do it, and then you can jump in pretty early because it was kind of your idea to name it.
Sounds good.
Today's topic is dropping plates and dropping balls. Normally, people try to be super positive and talk about spinning lots of plates and keeping all the balls in the air and techniques to do that. But there are times where creating art breaks down and creating and writing and doing all that jazz wears you out, burns you out. And I think it's important to recognize that doesn't mean that you are failing, and it doesn't mean that you are less than. It more likely means that you are actually honest. To recognize when enough is enough. You've bitten off more than you can chew. You're burning candles at both ends. Whatever little phrases you want to work in there, they all exist and are common because it's part of the human experience. So Josh, why did you want to talk about this today?
Well, because I think I think particularly the guys like you and me, and I suspect a lot of artists, especially cartoonists. I've talked about how people who are drawn to cartooning tend to be people who really like challenges because it's one of the most challenging things you can take on, because it's just so many facets to it. And I think that challenge in itself and like respect and love for it like really drives people to kind of give their all for it. Um, but I also think there's a little bit of like control that people like about comics. I think and animation and self-directed projects where you're steering your own ship and it's a good feeling. But the type of people who tend to like steering their own ship are generally kind of type A personalities, and so the that can kind of be problematic when it comes to dealing with like, when you're a type A personality, you're going to take on every challenge you possibly can.
Yeah.
And inevitably, being a human being and being fallible, you're gonna fail.
Right.
And that's actually part, like we were talking about that a couple days ago, where I think a few episodes ago where we were talking about the somebody asked in the chat, like, when do you get better with art or something to that effect. And I think my answer was just, you don't. You just kind of fail a lot, and then you get better learning from failure, and you learn how to recognize potential failures later on.
Yeah.
And you just learn, you recognize failure quicker, and you know how to reroute.
And you also get hardened. And you learn new and interesting and harder ways to fail.
Exactly. And as you're doing that, you're going to line up successes as well. And but the thing is, like with my type of personality, pulling on projects like I have, like where I'm recording a demo with some friends, I'm super active with my family because that's a plate that cannot drop.
Right.
I'm working on a graphic novel that I'm hoping to finish this year. And it's hundreds of pages, hand lettered, hand inked. You guys are familiar with it if you follow the show. I'm doing, illustration freelance on the side. And then I'm also, I think I mentioned art directing, which is just super time consuming and taxing and can kind of pull you away from everything if you let it, because of the amount of responsibilities you could let kind of just suck like your whole life away. And then on top of that, I'm also like, really interested in the idea of building community online, in branding, in, taking on like this anthology challenge and stuff like that. And it's just, there are just times where all of that, I'm juggling it and a plate drops, and I get pretty hard on myself when I drop a plate. And so that's what I thought would make it an interesting topic, is the fact that I find it fascinating objectively, like about myself, that it bothers me so much when a plate drops. Whereas if I were one of my friends, like Cory, if this were you saying the same thing, I'd be like, well, dude, what do you expect? You're juggling a million projects,
right.
You're working really hard, and it's kind of amazing you get done what you do get done.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to myself, I'm like, but that's not you. Like that, you're not allowed to have that excuse,
Yeah.
It's a weird thing, and it's like it's a part of myself that I don't want to quell too much, because it does drive me to accomplish more than a lot of people. And I don't mean accomplish like in the sense of laurels or anything like that. I just mean output.
Yeah.
And
just
so
production.
Yeah, so it's a hard topic, because I think that for most people who are taking on these kind of things, there are a few people who might need to actually hear you're actually not juggling that many plates, and you need to throw a little more in there.
Well, I often say I wish I had as much disposable time as I had when I thought I was busy in college.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Think, like a lot of people are like, "Oh man, I don't know how you get all that done," and I'm like, hey, 20-year-old, I don't know how you don't. You know, like I'm pushing 40. with a mortgage and a full-time job and several full-time projects and kids and, you know, church stuff and like, you know, I know you've got a part-time job and several classes and stuff, but at the same time, like, you know, what is keeping you from doing that? But
Yeah.
here's an interesting thing about this topic. The first time that I really hit a limit was I was working I was teaching at this school, but I was in a temporary position, and they basically said, you know, you need to get your master's or this job goes away. And so it was crunch time, right? And so I
Yeah.
said, okay. And at the time, you know, between like, you know, full-time job, full-time family, and I was like 60 pages into my comic that I was doing.
Yeah.
I was slow. I'm still not very fast when it comes to art. I consider myself to be quite slow. I put a lot of time in it as a way to compensate for that, but I'm not quick. And so, you know, at most I was doing a page a week. You know, and that was colored,
Yeah.
you know, and inked and everything. But in any case, I looked at that and I looked at adding a master's degree to that. And I wasn't one of those. Somebody told me, when you think about getting a graduate degree, it's like being pregnant. You're going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be horrible the whole time. So do you want to do that for, you know, a year and a half, or do you want to do that for 5 years? It's going to suck. It's going to suck either way. And so I actually got a master's degree in 14 months, and I did 2 5-credit classes every 10 weeks, for about 10 months. And
Yeah.
I had to stop doing my comic because something had to give. And that was the first time where I realized, like, there are limits to my ability
Yeah.
to push. But then about 10 months into that, I reached the absolute envelope of my ability to continue to do production, you know?
Yeah.
And so I had to cut down to 1 5-credit class, while I was working full time and everything. And I had never taught before. So I was like learning how to teach as well.
Yeah.
And just cutting down to like 1, which is still a lot, taking a
Yeah.
full time, you know, 700, 800 level class, you know, while you're working full time and doing family and stuff. I'll just give you a quick schedule. I would get up, I would go to work, I would teach all day, I would go home for an hour so I could see my kid, and then I would go back to work, and I would work till 2, 3 in the morning on my master's, and I would repeat that 7 days a week. I did that for 10 months straight without a break. And
Wow. You know, like, just to put that in perspective, like, when I was working on my MFA, like, was just supporting my now wife, and that was it. So it was like, and she was working at the time too, so I was working full time, and I had like probably like 4 pretty big like nervous breakdowns
mm-hmm.
during the process.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine like throwing a kid in that equation with, and when the thing that's interesting and just I think worth explaining to people who maybe haven't done their like the graduate work at like I'd say at like a good school, because you could probably get a fairly quick master's degree, like, you know, at it, but I think when you're in an intensive program,
Yeah.
um, it's gonna make you question a lot,
Well,
like at
they're
points.
like designed to break you down.
Yeah,
Like
and
the
at
good
points,
ones, they intend. I talked to my professors after I was done, and I was like,
yeah,
because I was in one class where I submitted 93 proposals before the professor accepted my proposal for my concept.
yep,
And I asked him, because he didn't do that to anybody else in the class, and I asked him later, I was like, what was up with that? And he goes, this program is designed to break you down so that we can build you up correctly. And I just knew that you were at a level where, you know, everybody else could take rejection, you know, in the 6 to 12 rejections. And I just, knew you could take more. So I was like, yeah, but like almost 100, like 10 times more than everybody else. But yeah, those programs are designed to do that. They're like they're made to do that.
And I think it's part of the process because you get to a point where you're kind of questioning everything, and that's a good point to get to at some point in your life.
Yeah.
Especially as an artist, like questioning your direction or your style, or just in general, like kind of abandoning a lot of ideas that you might have had going in through just the pressure cooker. It really, it's almost like that weird thing of like, there's nothing that gives you clarity about life as being in like a really close call car accident, where you're just you're forced to kind of deal with like what's important. And not saying that it's a car accident, but it's just pretty, it's a pretty intense experience, and it does create this moment, like, and I think Cory was touching on this, where you have like this window open in your mind, and then your capabilities, like you were saying, just kind of like skyrocket. Like the amount of stuff I was able to do for my graduate work, and I'm sure we both have similar experiences on this. It was just mind blowing. In retrospect, I have no idea how I did that on top of like full-time freelance.
Right.
Because I'd work like 16 hours and then do grad work after that.
Yeah.
And I was in grad school with some guys who just like, they just had accrued a lot of savings and just literally were like, this is it. I'm just focused on this. And it was hard on them. So it's just, it's fascinating, but you're right. Like that is, for me, that's one of the big points in my life where I just I actually reached a couple points where I was just like, I cannot do, like, I actually can't do this, especially before the final show and the paper. I was just like, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah. Well, and I'll
like
tell you,
formatting.
Yeah. You want me to do MLA or Chicago or what? I can't even like put together a coherent speaking sentence right now. But one of the things that I think was really interesting from that is I learned, and I think this is important. I know physically as an athlete, which to look at me now is surprising, but is really important to know your actual limit, not your mental limit, but your physical limit. And I think it's important to get to the point where you are, here's the thing. If you burn out, the time prior to burning out was not productive. It's not. What you start doing is you start working harder, and getting less done. And so before you head down the road of burnout, like kind of you mentioned that you feel like you're on the edge of burnout. Most people, until they hit a limit, they don't know what that feels like. And so they're not aware that it's happening until after it happens. Like, Sean McCabe, just came out and was super vulnerable on his podcast. It's super interesting. He talks about being addicted to work, being a workaholic, and how that caused him a bunch of depression that he was dealing with, and he had to fire a bunch of people on his team. Very vulnerable episode. But something that he said that stuck out to me is he said, if you think you might be burned out, you already are. And that's an interesting thing. And but here's the upside of this. If you find your limit, which is different than burning out, you find like your physical limit of like, I can't go that far. I need more sleep than this. I need more wife time. I need more kid time. I need more job time. I need more downtime of just not producing and just, enjoying and whatever. You hit a limit. Pay attention to how that feels, because leading up to that, there's a sweet spot that you can hit where it's a bit of a struggle at times, and then it's a bit of this rush of kind of at times. And if you can maintain that sweet spot, like on a motorcycle, every motorcycle is a little bit different. They're shaped differently, and so the wind is different. And each bike has a sweet spot on the freeway where a little bit faster and it's brutal. You're just getting beat to crap by the wind, and a little bit slower, and it's brutal. And there's this kind of like eye of the storm spot in the middle. And my current bike, without the fairing, that sweet spot is 93 miles an hour. That's the sweet spot there. And I can do 110, I can do 115, and like with the right gear, I can maintain like that speed. But it's at a sacrifice. Like I can't do that long because it's physically taxing, right? And
Exactly.
actually slower than that, if I'm at 75 or something, I can't do that for long because I'm getting beat up, right? It's the wind that's kind of hitting you. It's like if you're driving and somebody in the back right opens a window and you get that thunk, 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 thunk wind that happens sometimes. It's like that. And I think it's like that for production as well. Too little production, I feel like you just get down. You feel like you're not worth anything. You don't get those dopamine cycles of producing. You start to compare yourself in negative ways. Your mind is idle, which often gives way to anxiety and gives way to like comparison in a negative way. And too much production, and you're just pushing yourself too hard, and you're going to burn out. And so just short of too much, I feel like is this sweet spot that's still challenging, but isn't like physically demanding and physically taxing to the point of like burnout.
Yeah, so you'll notice like even at the top when I was talking about kind of feeling like I'm possibly skating that.
Yeah.
You'll notice like today, like I'll be posting updates on Instagram because I kind of know my sweet spot.
Yeah.
The problem is it's a little bit like surfing. And so occasionally you're going to bail. And that's the risk you kind of have to run with like high performance, I think, and also with tackling what you need to get done. But like there's also this misconception I think that's out there about like spinning a lot of plates. Like if you drop one, then therefore you should drop them all.
Right.
Or like that's one misconception. And I think the other is that you can't like pause, like kind of glue that plate back together and get right back at it.
Yeah.
So there's a mix and a balance, and it's a fascinating thing. But it's also one of those things that, and we've talked about this before, but it's like, there's this momentum cycle we've talked about. And you hit this point every once in a while when you kind of keep with art and you keep with creation and you kind of fight it like we're probably going to have to do tonight,
Yeah.
When you're like at that point where you're just like, it's like that point where you're lifting weights or whatever, and it's just a little like, you're just like, I can't. But there's a part of you that when you've done it long enough, you haven't reached your capacity. When everything about you, like your body, everything is telling you can't, you can't.
Right.
And it's this, but the problem is even the most seasoned person can kind of know the signals a little better, think that they're getting that signal of like, my mind's telling me I can't and I can, and then push it and then like end up with like a tear, like in keeping with the working out analogy, or like throwing out their back or something like that. So it's a weird thing. And like for me, I think the important thing like is recognizing if you're potentially close to burnout, because you need to be aware of your own signals. Like if you've had burnout, you know exactly what those signals are.
Yeah.
And so you can, it's kind of like getting a Wi-Fi signal. Like you can be more aware of where it's at so that you can tap into that fine point where you're not getting burnout, but you're still getting your signal, because you don't want to be completely away from the signal, because then you're just disconnected,
Right. And I like what you said about spinning plates, because a lot of people say you drop a plate and it's like, all right, put all the plates down, all of them. Don't keep any of them, and stop juggling all the balls. and go take some time for yourself. Go sit in the woods and spend some time for yourself. And actually, what I think you should do is, if one of those plates starts to wobble, put 2 or 3 of those plates down and keep the rest spinning. Because if you just stop, or if you go so much that they all fall over because you just lose it completely, either one of those has the same result. It's a total dead stop. You completely lose momentum. So to go back to our, biking up a hill and then coasting down the other side, if you're on that push and you just stop, then you just go back down to the bottom of the hill. You've got to start from less than 1, because you're going to coast backwards for a while, right? Yeah. But if anybody who's run or biked or anything like that, and you're going and you've been pushing yourself super hard, and you realize, oh my gosh, and you get off your bike and you walk and you keep going, but you do it, that is just as good as a rest. And plus, you still maintain momentum. It's not a ton of momentum, and it's going to take you a little bit longer to get to the top, but you still get there. And sometimes, I've heard this phrase a lot, that a change is as good as a rest. And I like, actually, a change is better than a rest in a lot of situations, because if I just say, okay, I'm doing 15 things right now, these 6 are really important, and so I'm gonna pause these ones and kind of readjust and keep these 6 going. Or I've got these 3 major projects going, and this one isn't due right now, so I'm gonna do these 2. All of a sudden, you have this second wind. You've got all this energy, and sometimes you can even go faster. Right? It's like downshifting your bike. All of a sudden, all these extra gears come in, and it really works. And so I would recommend, if you feel like you are, or if you see a plate drop, right, and it breaks and it shatters, put a couple down. That's fine, but not all of them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another thing that's super important too is like having peer groups. Having some kind of accountability group. And so like we joked when we started this that it's almost like AA for artists.
Right.
But I think it is important, because at the end of the day, like it's funny, as predicted, I am starting to feel a little more energy.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things about just being able to talk it out, and also just even discuss things that you yourself have learned about art, it's a good reminder to yourself of the stuff you know. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, meaning like while we talk about like tips and stuff of how to deal with this kind of thing, we only know those tips because there's occasional times where we don't deal with it well. And so it's like, it's neat to, I just think it's important to have these kind of moments, or have some kind of thing set up like that, that can carry you through that, that temptation to like, bail. Because like, once again, the other great thing about like I have a really great wife. Cory does as well. He has a really good wife. And so like the great thing about having good relationships and friends and stuff like that is, a lot of the time they can be the people as well to be like, okay, this is too many plates, like, cool it, but it's this risk, right? Because there's it's a 2-pronged thing. And I think the thing that makes it so complicated is, I really do love, and I know I harp on it all the time, but Pressfield's War of Art talks about this battle, and the analogy of art as a battle is just one of the most helpful analogies I can think of. And it's really tough if you're gaining ground. Like, what happens in a war if you just stop? Like, you're gaining ground and you stop. That can be detrimental. Like, that can be a real, like, a problem. And so it's one of those things of like, war is hard. And by choosing to create, especially to create your own vision, it's like you are kind of going to war. You're choosing to go to war.
Yeah.
And so there's gonna be some casualties, and there's gonna be like, some hits and stuff, but it really is important to keep gaining ground. However, you don't want to fall into like a productivity loop where you're producing so much that you lose yourself and you lose the purpose of why you're doing it in the first place, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's this fascinating thing, but I do think it's important. It's important if you're new and you feel like you're pushing your limit, you probably haven't hit your limit. You know, because like a lot of what gets you through when you're new is pushing your limits.
Right.
When you're a little bit further into it, then it's time to be like, it's okay to occasionally have a time where you can't. And actually, it's kind of admirable. And I'll tell you, like, coming from just the perspective of an art director, I'll respect can't over someone saying can and then putting me in a position where I have to scramble making up for a missed deadline.
Yep.
Because like can't is like, even if it's annoying to hear, it's truth and it's helpful. But yes, 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 and then not delivering, that's like that can be even worse or more detrimental. So it's like it's a really weird, hard to discuss topic, but I can definitely say for myself, like I don't feel like I've hit that limit yet. I don't feel like I'm even surfing yet, like in keeping with our billion analogies here. But I don't feel like I feel like I'm looking for that sweet spot right now, and I'm pretty close. So to me, it's like if I find that burnout's happening, I need to correct. Like if I find like I'm leaning that way, and if I find I'm leaning the other, I need to correct. But it's all about kind of just trying to stay balanced on, I guess, keeping the bike thing, trying to stay balanced on that bike. You know, I don't want to lean too far to the left because then I'll bail. I don't want to lean too far to the right because I'll bail. And I just want to find that like sweet spot where, you know, there's a clear path, and I can just, you know, hit that downhill part or catch the wave or whatever it is. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But do you have any other like kind of tips or thoughts on that? Because I do feel like I've been talking a lot.
Oh no, I think I've talked a lot too. Yeah, I think the main thing is there are certain things that should be non-negotiables, and they're going to be different for everybody.
Yes.
You know, like for me, it is a non-negotiable to not have family time after work, right? There's not, you know, there are days where I'm unable to do that because of like my livelihood that is feeding and housing my family. But, you know, but if it comes down to me reading to my daughter or doing my art, one is a non-negotiable and the other is, you know, something that I will sacrifice sleep for or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm going to read, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. And so, and that can be different for everybody, right? There's going to be a different thing. And I think, being honest about your non-negotiables, is really important, because when you are, and it kind of brings me back to this idea of balance, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about with plates and juggling and bikes and surfing and whatever. It all comes down to balance. And the idea of balance is not that you attain balance once and then you're balanced for the rest of your life. You know, balance is a series of micro adjustments with the occasional big whoop, you know, and so if you look at it like balance, it's not like you can like sit down one time and be like, I'm going to spend this much time on this. This is a non-negotiable. And now I never have to think about this again. You know, it's like sometimes weekly, you know, sometimes monthly, and sometimes daily. You're going to have to sit there and be like, okay, let's assess my priorities here. You know, and if you're doing that more frequently, that can't take long, because that in and of itself can be a distraction. But if you're doing it kind of infrequently, you know, spending a little time and being like, you know, like what is important to me here? And I was talking about this with Scott when you were gone, Josh, and one of the things that came up was, you know, having that decision made, like I'll be working and then my daughter will come in and my immediate thought is the wrong thought, which is defend my work time, you know, defend my productivity against the invading force, you know, or whatever.
Yeah,
And
totally.
luckily in my mind, I have that check. Wait, no, your relationship with your daughter is a non-negotiable. It trumps this.
Yeah.
And so then I can respond accordingly. And so I think that really helps. And it will also help with if you begin to reach kind of the envelope, if you begin to reach your limit, then you can
Yeah.
say like, okay, what are the essential things? What are my non-negotiables? I'm going to hold on to
Yeah.
those, like I'm going to produce art every day. Now, whether I work
Yeah.
on 6 projects or 1, it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And whether I spend 8 hours on it or I spend 30 minutes, it's going to happen. But I
Yeah.
mean, there are some days where I say, I'm going to play video games with my kid. I'm going to go
Yeah.
on a date with my wife.
Hmm.
I need to spend 3 extra hours at work, or whatever. And so knowing your priorities is really helpful in knowing what plates you put down and which
Yeah.
ones you never put down.
Yeah, I did a vlog about this a long time ago, but this is something I consider all the time, and I'm glad you brought it up because this usually does have to do with the plates because there are some plates that can't be dropped,
Yeah.
um, and so there's a couple methods to like just juggling multiple tasks, and the biggest one has a lot to do with back planning, which we've already discussed, so I won't get too heavily into it. Just go back to some older 48-hour art checks. And Cory described that very well, but it's a process that if you can get it down, you're much more likely to be able to do a job similar to what I do, where it's like art directing or leading,
Yeah.
thinking big vision stuff, and also managing small stuff. It requires a lot of back planning. But if you're if you're struggling, a lot of the time it just means that you haven't really sat down and figured out a priority list. And these things are always in conflict with each other. Like priorities, just by the nature of setting them, creates conflict. And it's good conflict. It's
Mm-hmm.
good conflict because it's going to butt up against it. Every once in a while there's going to be moments where your priority list, whatever's number 4, starts butting up against number 3, and you have to reassess, and usually if you've really thought out your priorities, number 3 remains, and it pushes number 4 back into place. You know what I mean? And so, like, Cory, as he mentioned, like reading to his daughter, like that's a huge one up there. For me, I have like just a clear sense of priorities, like, and it's going to be different for each person. For me, it's God first. It's going to be, my family next. And that's my like immediate family, like the people under my care, like my wife, my kid,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Then my family, my family after that. And then right under that is art, and friends. And it actually, friends and art are a mix. I tend to put friends above it, but art is, especially the daily creation thing, that's a non-negotiable. Like,
Yeah.
and that actually was really hard for me to do. I remember when I was a young artist, those were shifting all over the place, and it, that when you have that happen, inevitably you're going to have a point where you have to work out your priorities. Friends usually are above, especially in crisis. But if it's like hangout time, like I will put, like, I have to have productivity of some kind of comic or art before that, unless it's a crisis.
Well, and the crisis is a really good example of balance, right? And
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
if you are walking a tightrope or surfing or,
Yeah,
longboarding or wakeboarding or whatever it is, something that requires balance, and a wave, the wave shifts or a gust of wind hits you or whatever, you readjust your priorities, right? And so,
yeah,
like if I have someone in my life that's everything's great and I see him once a month, that's wonderful, right? But if then
yeah,
all of a sudden something serious happens, well, maybe I see that person every day. Maybe I go sleep on their couch. Maybe
yeah, exactly.
like things have to shift, right? But
Yeah,
that's not sustainable.
exactly.
But it's definitely one of those moments where you've got to make a big move to stay
Yeah,
balanced, and there are times where things shift around. So I think that's fine, and that's why I think having a decent idea of what your general balance looks like in your
Yeah.
priorities, but recognizing, like what you're trying to describe, I think is that it's hard to say, once you get to a certain level, like which one comes first, because it becomes very
Yeah.
situational, because it depends on, how everybody's doing, how you're doing, a
Exactly.
lot of variables come into play. And that's that idea of balance being
Yeah.
a consistent action that happens throughout your life rather than an event that you move on from
Exactly.
afterwards.
Exactly. And I think the key thing with that too is like even talking about the conflict that's going to happen once you set those. It's a perfect example because like, and the War of Art, like once again, I think one of the reasons that book touches home with people is it'll talk about things like this that you will experience the second you try to do something positive for your life.
Yeah.
So if you try to write a novel, um, all of even the people on the list that might be higher priorities than that novel, everything, even supportive people, will inevitably there's at some point where out of the woodwork everything is going to cause resistance,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it's actually just in your head.
Right.
But it's maybe it's just guilt or something like that, but the point being you're going to experience resistance. That's the time where your car is going to break down. That's the time where like it's like, and that's why Pressfield talks about it being like a war, because it's like this is the second you've stepped into the battle. So like everything around you, you have to be super observant of because you're at war,
Yeah.
and so it actually is a really weird thing because, like I said, they will kind of butt up against each other, and you have to constantly like the solid priorities, the unmovables, um, you know, will always usually withstand if they truly are unmovable. They will almost every time hold firm when that shift happens.
Yeah.
But the ones that are a little further down the list like will be much more in flux all the time and always butting up against the top ones. So like a perfect example is like my desire to create is always a constant threat to my desire to be with my family. And so it's like I have to balance that out in this weird kind of way, and it's never clean and easy.
Right.
And it's something to always be aware of. And it's not really I mean, it's not a hard choice. And it's, the way you were describing it makes perfect sense because it's like I will get home exhausted from work, but then I've got a kid who wants to play with me and like,
Yeah.
play cars and stuff. And I'll have one or two moments of being like, oh, I just want to draw every once in a while, in all
Right.
honesty. And some days much worse than others. But, most of the time, that goes really quick. And almost all of the time, the second I actually sit down, start playing, especially when I've chosen to be present rather than like focusing on the thing I can't do,
Yeah.
focusing on the coolness of being able to spend time with like a person whose like imagination is wild and awesome and is like my favorite person. And it's like, that's what it's like when you're with your kids. It's like the second you kind of are in the moment, it's always enjoyable. The only times it's not enjoyable is if you're focusing on past. So it's like for instance, if I'm bringing work with me, or whatever frustrations, or if I'm bringing future with me. But anyhow, we've gone really long.
I was going to
um,
say, speaking of
yeah,
balance, in 20 seconds
exactly.
we will hit an hour of recording time.
Okay, let's call it.
So
um,
we
yeah,
had talked about we had talked about only going, and this is an interesting exercise and exactly what we're talking about. We've discussed having Mondays be the long day, and then Wednesdays and Fridays be kind of shorter. And there's been a couple times when we've done that, but we haven't been as good at it. But I think both of us kind of went into this knowing that this is wanting it to be shorter, but knowing it was going to be a little bit longer, because now I feel like I can turn 45 degrees and start drawing immediately right now, and I haven't had that energy all day. But being
yeah,
able to do this
neither have I.
is super important. So
Yeah, and I
anyway,
appreciate it. So thank you, Corey, too. Like I really dig the art checks, and it's like we suspected this at the beginning. Case in point, I mean, I have energy enough to probably get some work done. So
Yeah.
and that was had we not done this, I probably would have gone to bed and just felt terrible tomorrow.
Well, and I'll give you an example really quick because we're wrapping up. But last night at like 9 o'clock, and I usually go to bed after midnight, but at 9 o'clock I was beat. I was hanging out with my wife, and I was trying to sketch some ideas for the sticker stint, and I just told her I need to take a nap. Wake me up before you go to bed, because she gets up at 4:30 in the morning to like work out and stuff. So she goes to bed way before I do, and so she woke me up, about 30 minutes later, and I was just like, I can't. But then I thought, I have to do something because art check is going to be tomorrow. And so if you are still on the fence about an art check, seriously consider doing it. I actually think you'll get more done by adding this to your schedule than you would otherwise, because it does help you kind of shift priorities. So with that, if you want to check out the stuff that Josh is doing, go to quarterlystories.com. And you can kind of see what he's working on there. He's also posting stuff to Instagram. So check out Instagram, because you can see both comics that he's working on right now. One for the anthology and the one for Quarterly Stories. If you want to see my stuff, you can go to corykerr.com. If you want to jump into the sticker stint, it is not too late. We are starting tomorrow, so you still have time. And you can go to corykerr.com/sticker stint. That's sticker STINT. And as always, if you'd like to check out edited versions of what we just did on this video, then go to corykerr.com/48HR or wherever podcasts are sold. And
awesome.
We are there. Okay, so we'll catch you guys in more than 2 days, and enjoy your Valentine's, and we will see you for a super short episode sometime this weekend. We're out.
Bye.